I think this is gonna be an interesting episode today. Oh crap, we're supposed to do our intro. I'm Ben.
I'm Cammie.
We have 6 kids.
We've been together for 20 years.
And today we're gonna rock your world about sex ed.
Woo!
You're listening to the Fight for Together podcast.
That was a little intense.
Yeah.
Okay, while I start on the ice cream,
No fair.
why don't you talk about what you were nervous about with this podcast? I'm eating Grater's Rocky Road, which is really good.
No, s'mores.
Oh, it's more. Sorry.
Yeah.
So much better than Rocky Road. They made the graham cracker. It actually tastes like graham cracker.
Mm.
And
It's pretty good.
The coconut is really good. The problem with this ice cream is it has these chocolate chips that are just massive.
It's a problem for Ben.
So I always take them and I lick them off, get the ice cream off, and then I stick them in Cammie's bowl, and she eats them.
Bonus.
Okay, so why were you nervous about today's topic?
Yeah, we're going to talk about a book I just finished reading called Beyond Birds and Bees. Subtitle, Bringing Home a New Message to Our Kids About Sex, Love, and Equality.
The author is Bonnie
J. Ruff. Rowe?
Oh.
Ruff or
I
Rowe?
think it was Ruff.
Not sure if it's Ruff or Rowe. And I really liked this book. It really challenged me in a lot of ways. And I was nervous because I really like this book and I really wanted to convey certain things on this podcast. I don't even know what those things are, but they'll probably come out one way or another. And I think also this topic is really dear to my heart, if that's the right way to put it.
Sex?
Not so much the sex part, although I found that it's all kind of lumped together, really. You can't really separate it. But more the equality part, gender equality or just equality with just humans in general. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about it, though. Now it's my turn to eat my ice cream.
I'm still trying to eat mine.
Well, I haven't even started on mine.
So you were nervous, and I was saying, well, we'll just treat it like it's a conversation between you and I.
Yeah. That helps. Yeah, it doesn't really, like, whatever comes across, and it's not. But I really, really like this book.
I really like this marshmallow chunk I just got. Man, this is actually going to be really challenging.
Yeah. Not
so
roasting people out.
I'm going to vlog at the same time.
No,
We're
we're not vlogging, no.
But just so you know, it's like 11 p.m. here. And after a long day, we need something to, like,
Yeah.
get us down here. So sorry if it's not the highest quality experience for you. But it is for us right now. Okay, so this book. I think this is going to have to be a 2-part series.
Yeah.
Because
there's a lot.
There is so much here. And maybe for other people, they're like, why are you always talking about sex? What does sex ed have to do with much? Isn't that just like 1 week a year?
Isn't that just like naming body parts and then describing how to have sex or how babies are made?
And I think therein lies the problem.
Yeah. And she helped me see that. Like, I think living in our society, I didn't realize how much I actually even still believe that, at least for children. I don't think I believe that anymore about myself as an adult. Like it's more holistic than that. But man, like, she challenged a lot of my beliefs around children and their sexuality. It was really good.
Okay. This is not going to work. I can't podcast and eat ice cream at the same time. So you keep everyone company. I'm going to go put this in the freezer.
So you're assuming I can?
No, you got to talk.
I gotta talk. Well, then you better put mine in the freezer. Anyways.
No, just till I get back. Here's a chocolate piece.
Thank you.
I licked it off for you. I think we just have to get into it. I'm going to read some sections from this book, and we're going to talk about it because there's a lot here. So, let's see, page 34, 35. What does this say? So let's set the preface a little bit. Basically, you can get this from the back of the book. This is an American family. I think she has two kids.
Two daughters.
Two daughters.
Mm-hmm.
They're Americans, and they moved to Amsterdam. And I don't know.
For like a year or two.
I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I kind of forget. But basically, their viewpoint on sexuality and education gets rocked by going to Amsterdam.
Her initial trip, it got rocked, but she didn't even know it. But then they kept going back and forth between Seattle and Amsterdam.
So this is kind of a comparison and a contrasting of the way that this particular area of Europe views sexuality with the way America does. And there's a lot to learn. Regardless of what you believe in or what you agree with, I just think there's so much benefit from looking at these cultures.
Yeah.
And even if I think a lot of people listen to this podcast still have children they're responsible for educating. But even if you're not, I actually think that what gets called to the carpet here is the viewpoint of our own sexuality, and even understanding how we were raised, if you were raised in kind of this American fabric way of doing things.
Yep.
So, okay. So I'm going to just read this. Few subjects on Amsterdam Mamas ever accrued more comments or more passion than those threads, and they all boiled down to two camps. One group, mostly foreigners, insisted that covering kids protects them from exploitation. The other group, the Dutch voices, contended that telling kids they need to start covering up suggests it's their fault. Licentious photographers misbehave. Okay, so basically, and what's going on here is she's talking about in America, everyone like past the age of, let's just say, 1. Heck, even 1-year-olds, really.
Even newborns. I mean,
you wear clothes, you cover babies up. Nudity is like a big issue, and even if it's not like I'm trying to think of. It's a big issue for a lot of reasons. One is like you're exposing the child, and I think people turn it into like something that's sexual. But even if you're not, you're concerned that someone else is.
Right.
So let's say some sicko is at the playground, and they're, or in this case, they're talking about these places in the Netherlands where there's these like public fountains in the park, and the kids like. Almost all ages, like it seems like up to like
even elementary
or something, would just like go naked in the fountain. It was like, and it just was not like a big deal. And they talk about other examples, how, like when you're changing.
My favorite example was a lady who was, I guess, above her in an apartment, and she was leaning out the window to like give some keys to some like milk guy. I
remember that.
And she was totally just like bare-breasted.
Yeah.
And it was like no big deal. But that just gives you like, that actually is better. It's good to paint that picture because it actually helps paint the whole picture, because I think it's how you deal with all of nudity kind of shows you like how the children are going to be dealt with, you know?
Yeah, in a way, it has very little to do with children, but you can certainly see where it comes from how he talks to it. So why was that your favorite example? You seem like really passionate about that.
I just, I don't know. It just blows a lot of, I think, I mean, in America, first of all, just nudity is sexualized, but breasts are very sexualized. And for her to just be like, it wasn't a sexual thing for her to show her breasts, I don't think. Probably out the window to like almost a complete stranger. Or if it wasn't a stranger. I don't know. It was just like so free and just, I don't know. I loved that picture in my mind of her doing that.
Hey, look, there's Leo. The cat wants to get on the
podcast.
Meow, meow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I just remember another example about how the Dutch don't like close their curtains if they're going to change. It's it just like wasn't a big deal. Like it's kind of like, oh, people are going to see or they're not going to see, but it wasn't sensationalized or
even sexualized nudity.
But what they're saying is because of, I guess, internet culture and photography, now even they're starting to change because there's people beginning to take pictures of kids, or at least that's what they're worried about. So that's where we find ourselves. It's in this conversation.
Well, it's it's like a big debate where, you know, the parents are having to like really think like, do we succumb to this culture of like covering kids up or not?
So she says, I learned that the most important thing to tell a child about the possibility of exploitation, even more important than strategies for self-protection, is that no matter what, being tricked or abused is never their fault. So there's this thing that, like, because we live in a culture that's highly protective around sexuality, which is kind of ironic because in a way, I feel like our kids are exposed to more sexuality in like a Jake Paul video than our parents' entire childhood. So there's more sex in that way, but yet almost all the sexual conversation that's initiated by us as parents all has to do with protection. So it's like private parts, preventing kids from playing doctor, don't let people see you naked. It's all like this.
Well, and it's interesting what their first thing is, it's not your fault. So what are they doing? They're trying to take shame away. Like their primary thing was for there not to be shame around the child's sexuality. And our primary thing in America is safety first, protection.
So then she says, further along those lines, I would eventually hear from more Dutch parents who saw folly in thought placing. We just can't tell what another person is thinking or it motivates them. Sometimes we can only try to work around them. So they're saying that there's these photographers that are like taking pictures of the kids sometimes. It's not like a common thing, but it's just kind of like one of the hotbed issues. And she's like, you know, you can't figure out what's in their mind. Not only can you not figure out what's in their mind, it's not your responsibility to figure out what's in their mind. And you just got to work around them. Like, you kind of ignore them. You don't, like, all wear clothes and stay inside just because there's a few, I don't even want to call them sickos, but people that you don't even know what they're up to.
Right. Yeah, that really struck me, that they were asking these deeper questions and they didn't just like hand in the towel. I mean, in American culture, that whole one shady person and that whole thing would just be shut down.
Well, I think that there's a belief with shady people, if we want to call them that they can actually pose a threat. And not just that they can pose a threat, but that it's our responsibility to protect ourselves and to make sure that we are not being like abused, but it's not like the type of touching abuse or like something that could actually do us harm.
Maybe
it's actually like I don't know. I just think like in the environments you and I were raised in, like with women, if a guy looked at you like sexually or was attracted to you, then one would say, oh, you should have worn something different so you didn't get attention. Even if it was like...
And as if to say, you just got something taken away from you.
Yeah, both those things.
Right.
As if like you're less of a woman or less of a person now
Right.
So wear a turtleneck because you're protecting yourself. Mm-hmm. And even by me having a sick thought or, you know, fantasizing or something about you, you just lost something. So I think, you know, I'm just saying that to say, we don't really believe that so much anymore. Like, I mean, I think we need to protect our kids, but there's also a line where we're not responsible for what's going through other people's minds. And that's that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
To always be trying to figure out what people's minds are in the entire culture about us and be responsible for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it was in this page 38. They talk about the drapes. Countless good parents spend so much fruitless effort trying to cheer their body insecure kids. The way you look doesn't matter. Your body is normal. You're perfectly acceptable just how you are. Why doesn't it help much to say these things? In part because a lifetime of careful cloaking has already implied otherwise. In the end, it's almost impossibly simple. Real bodies become acceptable when they're a part of everyday life. Mic drop. I just added the mic drop because that is so.
Wow.
This is the thing. This is it right here. I mean, this is like for us, what we're learning. So we say these things to our kids. Oh no, your sex organs aren't bad or gross. Oh no, like your body's beautiful. But then if someone, like if I was to walk out naked, and even we talked about it with teenagers or something, everyone would just be like, people would be like, gross, sick. I mean, we say these things that like, how are we, and I'm just using myself as an example because I don't mind talking about myself, but with babies, teenagers, how can we on one side of our mouth say, oh no, you're beautiful, it's normal, it's natural, and then it never ever happens. And if it does, the first time nudity is seen since the age of like changing diapers is like Titanic love making scenes. I'm trying to think of Terminator 1. That was these were like the slow-mo scenes.
Well, they go even as far as to say if a baby has a dirty diaper, don't make faces or be like, ew, you know, when you open the diaper and the smell hits you. And, you know, there's a part of me that's like, oh, come on. Like,
that's shit, though.
That's, well, I know, but.
I'm fine with saying ew for shit. I get what you're saying.
Well, it's just interesting. You know, they're thinking about everything. Like, they're really, they know words have power.
Yeah.
And actions have power, even more so. Which, you know, is their whole point of if you spend your whole life, you know, hiding behind clothes and the worst thing in the world is for someone to walk in on you naked, you know, your own family, then that's gonna be a louder message.
And this was so healing for me about going to this nudist resort was just seeing that there's another way. I mean, because there was this like disconnect for me where I'm told bodies are beautiful, even like fat people. Like there was a comment today from our nudist resort from Cindy, who's been a longtime supporter of us, and she said, I'm overweight. This is like a public comment, so I think I can say this. She said, I'm overweight, and would it have been like gross for me to be there? And I think that's a very sexualized thing to say. It's like in our culture, overweight people are like not, they're sex objects, but they're sexualized, but not sexualized. You know, it's like the negative side of the sexualized. Yeah. Whereas, you know, maybe there's a health issue there. I don't know. But it doesn't need to be a big deal. Like, you don't need to be like, ooh, gross. And I heard a bunch of people talk about nudist resorts, and they're talking about overweight people or old people, and they're saying gross. But that all implies sensuality or sexuality. It's like the opposite of a Hollywood model. But that way of viewing nudity just seems so narrow. Yeah. And it paints you back into this corner where, you know,
that would be like saying, to me, oh, just because someone's overweight, should they not enjoy sex, with someone? I mean, just because they're overweight, why can't they, enjoy being nude with people?
I agree with you, but you totally lost me. I have no idea what you're talking about, but amen, sister.
I mean, it's just, it's human rights, basically. It's, being able, like, I believe, I know in our country, like, you're not allowed to just walk out and be nude everywhere. But in places that you are, it should be, it should be right and even good for people who are overweight to be able to do that. And if not, that's, I think, kind of a crime.
I agree with you. I think we got a little bit off here. We're talking about rights for overweight people with nudism. Let's get back to sex ed. Okay, so page
it's all
52.
Related. In my mind, at least.
She said, okay, so this is them talking about sex ed at this point. She explained that when Dutch parents and teachers tell very young children about intercourse, quote, it's the same as explaining how milk comes out of a cow. Or when you have an itch on your ear. And you put your finger in it. When a baby is made, the man puts his penis inside the vagina. To the child, that's the same as putting a finger in your ear, unquote.
Oh, this is really good, yeah.
Then she says, this is a quote again, I think that some parents look at children thinking that telling them is the same as what we have experienced as adults. We know how it feels to have sex. When we talk to kids about it, we take that emotion and knowledge with us, but the children are different. So then this is kind of the punchline. Don't be afraid you'll say too much. A child grasps only what they're ready for. Okay, so this has been this was a huge fear of mine early on, was like, what are kids ready for and what's age appropriate?
Yeah.
But what they're saying is, like, sex means all this stuff to us. It means being in love. It means doing something naughty. It means, like, whatever, all this
physical pleasure,
like orgasms, babies, I mean, all the emotion that comes along with it. But to a kid,
and all the baggage too,
kids don't have all that. So unless we've taught it to them. So let's talk about the really young kids. I've heard this excuse from so many people. I don't know if I've used it myself, it's been a while, but where people say my kids aren't ready for that. Or they use this phrase, age appropriate. Age appropriate, I think, for a lot of sex ed is bullshit. Because usually what it means is parents aren't comfortable with it.
Right.
But if you talk about sex in a non-sensual way with kids, they get more bored by it than they do excited. I mean, it's like, that's why she said, it's like putting your finger in your ear. If you're like, that's a penis, that's a vagina, and kids, they're not that interested. Like, they don't have a reason to be yet. It's just like you're explaining how a car engine works. Like, they're like, okay, does it go forward? Okay, great. That's all I need to know.
Right.
It's like a horse. But we use this excuse all the time, and I think it's because we're uncomfortable ourselves.
And we're not understanding it from their point of view either. We're thinking it from our point of view. And from our point of view, if we're thinking that, then we're thinking we're going to harm them in some way with this information.
So at an early age, when kids are asking, what she's suggesting and what the Dutch do is they just answer the question, or they introduce it. What age appropriate has to do with, it's not assuming that they're going to be practicing or having sex, like intercourse, or that they're involved in the relational aspects of it. It can be just purely mechanical at that point. But I feel like kind of the unsaid thing is, from American parents that I hear say they're not ready, we say, okay, we're going to wait till they're older, till they're 10. But in the meantime, what we're doing is we're teaching them that sex is this really loaded, relational, taboo thing. Like, there's still a lesson being taught, even by the silence. Because what else do we wait that long for? If they ask, how much money do you make? We're like, a lot. It's like
Yeah.
more than $1,000. We have an answer for it. We don't have to like get into like, oh, how taxes work and how capital gains and, you know, Social Security. You just say like, you know, I can buy a house.
Well, I don't know. Are you going to get into this? Because one of the things she finds out is explaining sex to small children in part is telling them what parts they have. And when you don't tell little children like what parts they have, because I mean, no one has problems telling, you know, a little child, this is your nose, this is your ear, this is your mouth. But when you negate to tell them what's between their legs, a lot of kids will take that silence to mean, oh, there's something wrong there, or there's something to hide there, or to even like we teach them shame from that.
We make something exceptional that doesn't need to be exceptional.
Yeah.
So then it becomes, I want to see what's between my legs. Or then kids giggle about it. And in the Netherlands, kids just don't have that giggling secrecy weirdness.
And I think that's where shame comes in too. Like if I can't name my body down there, you know, there's not an autonomy that's being taught. Like I am empowered. Like I know what parts I have down there. I mean, I think I knew like vagina when I was 20. I mean, I'm really like calling it out here.
Call it out. Let's do it.
And I'm pretty sure that was it. And it probably wasn't till nursing school a few years later that I like figured it all out, at least in my head. And again, I wasn't like comfortable really exploring down there, you know, which I think if at an early age, if you're telling, let's talk about just girls for a minute. If you're telling girls, I mean, or boys really, but I think girls' parts are kind of more ignored, and there's reasons behind that, I believe. But if you're telling them like, okay, this whole thing here, this whole package is a vulva. This hole here is your vagina. But that's like one part of like a lot of parts down there that are amazing.
And, I like this. I've never seen this.
And you know, there's like these lips down there. What are they called? There's like something that looks like a penis. What is that called? You know, and it's just.
What is that called?
A clitoris, man.
Man.
Woman, that's called your clitoris. And it's just, I get really passionate about that because.
So why haven't you talked to our kids yet?
Okay, now you're really calling me out. I mean, I have a little.
I haven't seen you be this passionate.
Well, I mean, really, this book got me more passionate, and honestly, it's still kind of in my head, like, and it's still kind of stuck there in my head.
Mean, you have talked to our kids.
I have talked to them some, and I've definitely had moments of like, even just beating myself up for not talking to them more, which Ben kind of explained to me like that's not very helpful. For you or for anyone to do that, because you only know what you know.
But so here's a difference also, is before I think our strategy, not that we like really thought it out a whole ton, but was for you to talk to the girls and for me to talk to the boys.
Right.
But
yeah, and her whole point in there blew that out of the water, and it's like, if I can like very simplify it, it's if boys and girls know about each other's parts and in each other's like puberty process and all that in the same room, even like in there, it actually brings,
they teach it. They don't separate the boys and the girls.
Yeah, it actually brings more gender equality, which she explains all that and how that works. But I feel like that is kind of counterintuitive to at least how I was brought up.
I don't disagree with that, but that's not quite the thing that did it for me. Mm-hmm. What does it for me is just like, why separate it? By separating it, you're almost teaching people, I think, to separate it forever. Yeah. You're almost saying like, hey, this is private girl information. Right. You know, and we need to keep, and it's almost like
you're not like, you're celebrating differences and not celebrating ways that actually were alike, because there are differences, but you're not like.
Okay, I feel like you're turning it about it. The whole thing is the differences in a way. Well, okay, no, I take that back.
I mean, I think when you don't hide it from, like, if you're all like in this together, you then get on the same page, and there's not all these like secret and weird things.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Because the previous knowledge, I think, is like, well, why tell little boys about periods? Because it doesn't directly involve them, and it's weird, right? But what was weird about their experience was it wasn't weird,
right? And
actually, we don't have that.
Because they start from very young telling little... I mean, they don't separate genders a lot. They just don't really do it, even at the beginning. So it would be weird to suddenly do it at puberty. But for us as Americans, like, I think we just do that more. And then at puberty, it's like, well, why not do it again? Why not separate them again? Yeah, it really got me thinking. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're excited.
I knew it would come out, like, once we started talking about this stuff. I'm like, but and it did. I don't know. Like, I was really challenged to try to apply some of this, but it's hard to know.
For me,
how.
I was like curious as hell about women's body parts.
Yeah.
And if you don't find out in a constructive way, I think the curiosity is going to be directed into other ways. Yeah. And, it involves like sneaking around and just, I don't know. It's just so weird to me that we have, kids have access to the internet. We have access, giving our kids more information than ever in almost every other area of their life. Yeah. If they want to know how to code at the age of 5th grade, they can hop on Khan Academy and we promote that. Or if they want to watch YouTube videos for some kid in India, we're fine with that. But then when it comes to sex, we're like, you're not ready.
Yeah.
It's just,
it is weird.
It's just a little inconsistent.
It's one of those things.
Which I think makes a ton of sense if we see that it's actually about our shame as parents. And really, let's just be honest, it has nothing to do with kids' actual development. They can handle knowing that sperm and egg make a baby, even if they don't understand what those things mean yet.
Or that having sex feels good. They have other contexts for that, in the sense of like, man, eating this ice cream really feels good, or having a back rub really feels good. But for some reason, when it's in that realm, we're like not okay with that kind of pleasure. Okay,
I want to get to one or two more ideas before we... This, like I said, this is going to be 2 parts. This could be more.
Yeah.
So, okay. This is from page 80. It says, to really root out shame. Oh, so she's in this exhibit of human sexuality in the Netherlands. And it's like, there's just like this giant thing that's full of sperm. Well, it's not full of real sperm, I don't think. But it's like, says, this is how many gallons of sperm an average male.
Well, you walk through a vagina and it's like
lifetime.
Sperm dripping from the vagina.
What?
Isn't it?
I think he just made...
Wouldn't that be an amazing exhibit?
That up, but I like where you're gone. Okay, so, but they have this... They're talking about the exhibit. To really root out shame, the exhibit reminded me, as one after another embarrassing but deep human moment came to light on the pinboard. Truth and pleasure needed to become more important and more discussed than secrecy and privacy. So this is like... This is one of the things is... We, in America, for real sex, value secrecy and privacy a ton. Now, not for fake sex. For Hollywood sex, it's all out there, or more than any place else probably in the world.
Yeah.
Like, fake sex it gets a ton of airtime. But for real sex, there's secrecy and privacy. So what they're saying is there needs to be a priority of truth and pleasure, which is really funny, I find. I mean, not funny, haha, but... It's so ironic that even though we say it's so private and so special, you'd think we'd have more pleasure with it. But what the Dutch are claiming, and this book and a lot of studies, I mean, they talk about how when you're actually educated about how these basic functions work and what they are, and I just take our marriage. So, you said at the age of 20, all you could identify was your vagina.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for you, acknowledgement of your clitoris, you felt shame around pleasure and orgasms and just that whole ball of wax for a good solid, 10 years plus? I mean, even up until recently in some ways.
Right. It's probably only been in the last couple of years that's really like changed for me.
So, I mean, we spent a decade just trying to dig out of shame. And I had...
Or coping with shame, really.
Yeah.
The first 5 years, at least.
So, when you don't have that and you just know, oh, these are my body parts and this is how they work and these are my preferences, and you have time to actually think about that, it will result in more pleasure over your lifetime. Which I think that's regardless of what religion you're from, that's a great thing for sex.
Like, if these body parts were made for pleasure, let's assume that you don't believe inherently that pleasure is wrong, then why wouldn't you want to use them to their full extent? Like, to let them feel pleasure. I mean, I was just thinking of like any other body part if we were to do that with, like, oh, I kind of just want to hear like halfway. Like, can you just like put some earwax in here so I can only hear halfway? Or maybe you could put like a cataract in my eye so I can only see. I mean, we don't do that. Like, that would be silly,
Well, I don't think people realize they're doing that.
No, I know.
We've kind of like settled for we like, as parents, I think we like kind of close our ears and our eyes and we're like la la la, and we try and pretend like we can delay sex. Where one of the interesting stats that this book says is that Dutch kids and American kids roughly are having sex at the same age, their first experience. The difference is the Dutch kids are experiencing better sex for their first experience. So, one of the questions today is going to be about abstinence. Regardless of your views on that, the stats are the same. Like, the Dutch kids aren't having sex earlier, according to the stats. Right.
Not to mention...
Or more.
Less unwanted pregnancies, less STIs, but they just go into all that.
So, this is the final thing I'm going to talk about on this episode. And I feel like this is going to be dropping a fucking bomb right now. But it's a really fun topic.
Tune in next time.
So, they're talking about playing doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This challenged me. I'm still chewing on this one.
Well, yeah. Okay, so what do how do we deal with kids play doctor? Let's just say they're like 3 years old. What do we do?
Best case scenario, we say, no, honey, we're not going to do that. Worst case scenario, we shame the kid or punish them for doing it.
Bottom line is we
stop it.
We
stop it right away.
Okay. The Dutch, they don't. They do something else, but they give rules for it. So, and there's like all these terms. It's like
they don't see it as bad or wrong or inappropriate in and of itself. They don't see it
correct.
that way.
They do in certain places. So, like, you're not allowed to do it at school. Some schools, which
was
really fascinating. Just like
that they would allow it, and therefore they go into this, but they see it as like a positive, natural.
They see so many positive things that are happening. Children are exploring. There's curiosity. There's learning.
I wonder how many people listening to this have a doctor story in their own childhood. Everyone. So isn't that funny that we all do this thing? So we don't stop to think, like, what if this is like part of the development?
But I think, like, without thinking about it too much, one of the theories that we operate off of is if we don't stop this thing, our 6-year-olds are going to be having sex.
Right.
But I think what we're overlooking is that it's just not a sexual thing for 6-year-olds. It's not sexual in the ways that we think of it. In one way, all your body parts, those body parts are sexual, but they're not doing it to bond with another human in in an intimate way. They're not getting aroused by it. They're not procreating by it.
Right.
So it's not sex as we know it.
Right.
It's curiosity. It's learning. It's play. You know.
So they have 3 rules.
So I don't like it. I don't like letting kids do it.
Yeah.
But when I'm honest about our reasons for stopping them, it actually doesn't make sense to me anymore either, especially when you consider the long-term negative effects.
Yeah.
Because from that point on, you're reinforcing that it's sexual, which actually for me as a child made it far more interesting and made me want it more than I think if I was just like...
It's sexual and it's taboo.
It's sexual, it's taboo, it's off limits.
Right.
And it's made for basically this one thing, which is, I never knew what, but I was like, I want to find out.
Right.
Whereas with the Dutch, they're just like, they kind of are around, they're comfortable around a certain degree of nudity, like within context. You know, they're not waving their junk around. I didn't get the feel for that.
Yeah.
But they're like, if you need to change, you can change. And it's like not...
So they have 3 rules, and those 3 rules are: don't cause harm, don't put anything in any holes, and it has to be consensual. I mean, well, in their terms, for 3-year-olds, it's like, as long as Bobby and Susie, or Bobby and Bobby, or Susie and Susie want to do it.
There's no older kids pressuring younger kids, or people being pressured.
Right.
It's just not age.
You have to
boys,
both
girls,
want
whatever.
to do it. So that's so simple, but yet, oh my gosh,
Which the other thing it does is
many.
It causes kids. Then you're teaching kids about consent.
You're teaching about consent.
Which, ironically, so we say no sex, no doctor, whatever. That's what the American way.
Right.
And we have a major epidemic on our hands with consent.
Right.
I mean, on every which way. Like, I don't even pay attention to the media much, but I just know that's a major issue now.
Because there's a lot of nuances with no and yes, especially the older you get. Like, maybe you're saying no with your body language. I mean, they teach all that in with doctor even, and with a lot of things, and
So,
that's part of their sex ed, is actually teaching that.
It is part of their sex ed, which I think is really fascinating at an early age. So one of the things that I realize, it's not just what, in some ways, the Dutch are more liberal by allowing kids to play doctor, but in one sense it's more conservative, because you actually begin the education process much earlier. And what could be more dangerous than ignorance around that area? You have kids that are in America that are getting molested.
It's because they
crazy.
care about it so much and put it at such a high value. That's why they do that.
I'm trying to think if I want to read this. Okay. Well, I'm just going to, I'll read this one line. Over the next 30 years plus, abuse prevention became the central communication about sexuality for young children in America, and it remains widespread in children's books, parenting rules, and advice from sexuality educators. So our viewpoint on doctor as Americans seems to be very similar to our viewpoint about almost all things sex education related with our kids. And what I mean by that is it's basically just safety and no. It's like, what do you call it? The one... you're banging the one drum or something like that. And our story matches this. When we were parenting Dove and Eden when they were younger, it was basically like don't. Sex education was don't. Don't pull your pants down. Don't show this. Don't touch that. Don't let anyone see you or touch you. If someone says they want to touch you, tell us. Don't play doctor. That was sex ed for us.
Yeah.
And what they're realizing, and what we realized, is that just teaching kids don't, it creates shame and negativity around something that should be actually really awesome. Like, it actually exists for pleasure, and you can't undo that later on. Like, whenever you decide to be sexually active, whether it's as a teenager or marriage or whatever your standard is, you can't flip a switch that undoes 2 decades or a decade and a half of negative teaching. And
Right.
most of our teaching, and I think a lot of teaching I hear, it sounds conservative, but in one sense, it would be nice if it was like, okay, well, kids are having less sex, or they're looking at less porn, or they're getting pregnant less, or whatever your goal is. They're getting less infections. But that's not even happening either.
No.
So all that's happening is our kids are
more
having
shame.
shittier sex, and they're not enjoying something that they could be.
Yep.
And that was a story of us when we started having sex. For us, we happened to wait till we got married. But it didn't change the fact that we still had to go through, married or not, it didn't matter. Mm-hmm. Like, we had to undo decades of shame.
Right.
So what's at stake here is actually really massive. So, you know, for me, this conversation is less about like, okay, everyone needs to go allow their kids to play doctor or whatever. But it really revolves around these questions about, you know, what are we missing out on as Americans? And what can we do for our kids?
And I think it starts with your own sexuality, because I don't think you can't really give what you don't have. So if you have a lot of shame in your own sexuality, and I mean, I think it starts there. You know, I know for me, I dealt with a lot of that, and I've experienced a lot of freedom from shame around my sexuality, and I feel like I have a lot more to offer my kids now, like to help them with their own sexuality than I used to.
All right. It is time to go to the phones. This is
my
Heidi.
question about sex ed for kids comes from 2 podcasts I listened to recently. The first one was your guys' podcast when you visited the nudist colony resort. And then yesterday I just listened to Casey and Candace Neistat's couples therapy podcast, where they talked about their experience with nudity growing up as kids and adults. My question is, if you let your kids run around naked, and at what age do you tell them what's culturally or socially acceptable and they need to put clothes on? And also, do you have rules for your girls and boys about modest clothing? Also, if you haven't heard Casey and Candace's latest podcast, you totally should listen, because Casey was like almost the opposite of Candace. Candace was like pro nudity, and Casey was like, I don't want anyone to ever see me naked ever, not even my wife. Interesting.
Yeah, I could totally see that
I
too,
could call
actually.
that.
Did you know that they don't even sleep in the same bed? They don't even sleep in the same
Did she just
bedroom.
say that Casey, like Candace, has never seen him naked? That's probably not true.
Obviously not, but
Okay.
but he said that he doesn't ever want to be seen naked.
Oh, he doesn't
basically.
want to be seen naked, yeah. So the first question...
Did you hear how she did that little thing? She's like...
She gave us 3 questions.
Yeah, well, 2 main ones. She's like... she's like, what about kids wearing clothes? And she's like, oh, by the way, what do you think about modesty? That's like an hour-long
Oh, my
topic.
gosh. So the first question was, at what age socially...
So basically, Cammie and I went to a nudist resort 3 months ago. While there, I was reading this book. Mm-hmm. And my viewpoints have been changing like
rapid fire
in the last year. So we could tell you like where we are at now ish. It might be different next week. So what was cool for us though on the Appalachian Trail was there was just a lot more nudity. Like you had to piss and poo and take showers and rinse off in lakes and rivers and change all the time in tents, and there was just a natural place for that. And with Rainier, he was like swimming all the time in front of other people, like because getting a diaper wet,
naked.
Getting a diaper wet or a clothes wet unnecessarily was really, really inconvenient out there.
Yeah.
So we experimented. We had a little event when we came back. We went on a retreat with some friends to a lake, and I was like, let's just keep them naked. Like, we don't believe it's wrong. And you had a hard time with that.
I had a hard time because of the social things. Like when no one else is doing it, it's harder for me. Yeah.
But it was so funny because we did it and every single person mentioned something about it. they were like, "Oh, Rainier's naked," and they like laughed, like they weren't like mean about it,
No.
but they called it out. I think everyone was like, I don't want to say uncomfortable.
Well, they might have been.
But they all had little kids, and they were all wearing like little outfits.
Yeah.
And I think people were trying to make sense of it. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And he's really the youngest one that we could experiment on, because I feel like all of our other kids are older, that it'd be harder to change anything at this point. And being in this culture, honestly, it's like, where are you going to do this? I mean, I guess you would go to like nudist colonies or something. But we've just been trying to like practice it ourselves a little bit. Like, we're not as uptight about walking to the bathroom, to our bedroom nude. And if someone sees us. Like,
or with Rainier.
Yeah.
Like, he's being potty trained. He walks around like wearing nothing. And even I think we would have been more careful about that. Yeah. I don't know.
Or if someone who's not in the family walks in, I'm not like, got to cover him up real quick.
Yeah. So it's been helpful for us already even.
Yeah.
Modesty. We're in a place right now where we let our kids wear what's comfortable to them.
Yeah.
And some of our kids we have to push to dress more immodestly, I would say. Not because...
Which we don't really push them much. I mean...
Well, not much, but, I'm not trying to turn them into sex objects, but either way, I think fear is far worse than being over modestly or under modestly dressed. So if you're like afraid what people think about you on either side, so in that way, I'm pushing some of our children that think about other people's opinions more to not think about other people's opinions.
That's true.
And I don't think we really have kids that are, at least this hasn't been a big issue for us yet, where they're like dressing immodestly to attract people.
When we say immodest, I mean...
Yeah, I don't even know what those words mean anymore.
What is that? Yeah.
But I guess I'm using like...
None of our kids have dressed in a way so far that would made me uncomfortable.
In the past.
And when that happens, that will be interesting, because...
I think that happened, though. Like a year or two ago, we were more conservative.
That's true.
And we felt like it was our responsibility for our kids, like, no bra straps, like if you're certain length.
Sport bras.
Yeah, we were just like, we had kind of like these rules. And now we're like, you know what? We're just not really playing that game very much.
And I always have this weird feeling about, if I'm wearing a bikini, why wouldn't I let my teenagers wear a bikini? It just feels, and I know all the answers, they're not married, or they're 17, or blah, blah, blah. But it just feels so much more consistent to, if I'm wearing a bikini, like they should be fine wearing a bikini.
Okay.
Next.
Hey Crawfords, here's my sex ed with kids question. Abstinence until marriage. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to hear your answer.
Is that abstinence until marriage? Abstinence until marriage? Is that the question?
Yes. What kind of question is that?
By
the way, I'm not trying to talk shit to anyone leaving questions. In fact, I appreciate people doing it.
Thank you for yes.
But it does not make it any easier to answer. Okay, let me try and recreate what I think she's asking. Mm-hmm. She's asking, do you believe in abstinence until marriage? Mm-hmm. But then I don't even know what that means, because really people are saying, is it bad to have sex before marriage? Mm-hmm. Or possibly a variation of that, is it better to wait until marriage?
So we definitely have been, I could probably easily just say we used to believe, slam dunk, abstinence before marriage. Like, you should do that. That's better. And even a sin if you don't. I could say I'm not confident about that anymore.
What part? Because
I'm definitely not confident about the sin part. And the better part, is a little bit more, I can see that. But then I don't know, like, because she was giving scenarios in the book that was really helpful for me, because you have to put this in a real life thing, right? Because it's easy to say that until your kid comes to you and it's a real life thing, right? I don't know. If my kid came to me and was like, I'm ready to have sex, I want to have sex, and this is the person, and I like the person even, I don't know. Like, and she's even, I mean, this book is crazy interesting. Like, she even starts talking about, like, not only would you let your teenagers have sex, but would you let them have sex under your own roof?
Holy crap, you're giving away the whole ending.
I know.
Hey,
anyways, it just, I don't know. Let's talk this out. What are you thinking?
I lean towards better.
But is it better?
What do you mean, is it better? That's what I just said. I mean, I'm not like...
Well, what's better? Abstinence?
Waiting until marriage to have sex. Mm-hmm. Or, let me rephrase this. Waiting until at least who you're planning on marrying to have sex.
Yeah, because I still kind of believe, like... I mean, you're going to go through a lot of emotional shit if, like, you have sex with people and then you end up not staying with them.
Oh, you get pregnant. I mean...
And then there's that.
So, yeah. I mean... And I said it carefully. I said, I mean, I'm not going... You know, I'm leaning towards that. So if a kid asked me, I would say, yeah, I think that's a better idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at other people that aren't doing that, and in general, I don't see it like... Now, I think what we used to believe that you're pointing out is it's not always a moral thing. Mm-hmm. And I think when it becomes a moral thing, I think it means oftentimes you like turn your brain off, and we're just like, that's bad. Don't do it. Don't even think about it. That's bad.
And then you're not really, like, if your child comes to you and you need to treat them like they're a human and they have all these feelings and desires, and it's hard, you know.
Well, it's just like, it's really bad parenting to base your entire life off of one rule or principle.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sex ed in religious communities was based upon phrases like true love waits, and that's what we talked about with the whole Joshua Harris thing, or abstinence, you know. And I think there's a lot. I mean, we've practiced abstinence in our marriage for 6 months. Ish.
That's funny.
There was some touching going on. But. Yeah. You know, just to broadcast this universal rule that's, by the way, I mean, we're talking, let's say the Christians, not even really in the Bible. I mean, you're going to have a hard time finding it, at least, like a bulletproof case for that lifestyle. So if it's not in the Bible, then if you're a Christian and you're claiming it's on religious grounds, I don't know. I don't think it's as black or white as I used to. But in general, I also think that there's some benefits, quite more benefits than not.
So maybe right now...
But it's not the only thing I would teach.
We would steer our kids more towards abstinence before a, committed relationship, marriage maybe. But I think... But I'd like to think I'd be at least open-minded somewhat if my kid came to me and just I don't know, because the problem is if you preach the abstinence thing to your kids, like, and then they decide to be like sexually active anyways, then they're gonna hide it from you. And like, do you really want that?
Well, yeah. Okay, you said preach it.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to preach something just because you believe something.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe
or just make it scary.
I believe that these cigars is the best brand. But that doesn't mean people that smoke other brands have to hide it from me. But I think what you're talking about is more of a heavy-handed belief and enforcement and preaching that I actually agree with you. But I don't think that needs to... Believing that something's better. I mean, believing something that's right or wrong, absolutely 100%.
Is going to feel heavy-handed, even if you're not literally preaching it. Yeah.
Crap, where is the time gone? Okay, we got to wrap this thing up. So, gee whiz, thank you guys for following along.
Yeah.
We're going to get to part 2 next week. I'd really like to know if this is helpful at all. I know it's probably new to some people and probably a little confusing. At least it was to us. This podcast is available like all over the place, iTunes and all that stuff. We're getting reviews on iTunes. We have like a few positive reviews, and then we have some negative reviews that are anonymous. People aren't saying they give something 1 star.
Oh.
So,
well,
but you can help us out by, if you can think of anyone else that's wrestling through some of these sex ed conversations with their kids, and you think this would be helpful, if you could let them know, that'd be great. I want to thank our Patreons. We don't have any ads or sponsors for this, but we do have people that support us via Patreon, and we're really thankful to those people. If you guys have comments or questions that you would like to have answered on this podcast, you can do that at the Anchor app. And we have a Facebook group for ongoing discussion. All of the links and the link to this book is going to be in the description for the podcast, so check that out.
Yep.
See you next week for part 2.
Thank you for listening to Fight for Together. We'll see you next time.